The Lagos State government has disclosed the modalities for the commencement of a monthly rent payment scheme, which is expected to commence very soon in the state. The scheme will begin with those in the formal sector and then later transition to the informal sector. Landlords are still going to receive upfront annual rent, but Lagos plans to intermediate between landlords and tenants to act as a risk mitigator. Joining us to discuss further is the special advisor to the governor on housing, Mrs. Toke Benson-Awoyinka. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you, ma'am. So you're starting with the formal sector for this scheme. Can you explain why so? All right, we're speaking, of course, with the special advisor to the Lagos State Governor on Housing, Mrs. Toke Benson-Awoyinka. Mrs. Benson-Awoyinka, you're welcome. I wanted to ask, can you explain why you're starting with the formal sector for this scheme?
The formal sector is a low-hanging fruit. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Go right ahead. Yes, I can hear you.
The formal sector is a low-hanging fruit, and I think that is the most applicable tool right now for us to get the data at which we can apply the scheme.
How challenging will the scheme be to implement for the informal sector? When do you plan to transition there?
Well, upon transition and before transition, I think we're going to be able to gather enough data through the unions, through the associations, and we're hoping that will be the game changer for us when we get in there. The only reason why we cannot go in there right now is because we don't have that data for the informal sector. But as soon as we can get a hold of the associations and their unions, we should be able to apply the same scheme to that sector.
Great stuff. There are private companies already engaging in this already, the tech startups that are acting as an intermediary with what you're doing. Did Lagos partner with any private sector players, or is the government doing this all on its own?
Oh, most definitely. We are partnering with private investors. We have a capital market firm also called Noble Self Capital, and they are already talking to us on this. We are not doing it by ourselves. We're definitely handing it over to the private sector. We also want a place in the game where government stays as a buffer to the private sector. So yes, others have started it, but at what cost? We hope to bring down the cost drastically. We don't want this scheme to go off on a loan scheme where you're charging Lagosians humongous interest rates like 30%, 28%, 23%. We hope we can get it down to, if possible, single digits. And that's the reason why the state government is actually coming into the scheme and making sure that we get all the private sector people on board as well.
Great stuff. The scheme calls for Lagos State to still make annual upfront rental payments to landlords. Why are landlords still taking rent upfront on an annual basis when salaries are paid monthly? I understand that Lagos is the intermediary, but you're still paying up. So can you explain why that is? Why those annual upfront payments are still being made?
Okay. There are different sides to this policy. The landlords on one side, the tenants on one side. The landlord who has invested has actually put in a lot into the investments. We do not want to disenfranchise anybody because of the government scheme. So we'd rather pay the landlords up front and make sure we encourage them to build more. And it's also going to boost our tenancy rate in Lagos. We want people coming to Lagos on a daily basis. We want foreign direct investment in the real estate sector. We cannot do anything but to make sure that we encourage both the tenants and the landlords. The landlord goes away with his money, he reinvests that money back into the sector. In the same place, the tenant has the liberty to pay on a monthly basis. So we cannot disenfranchise the landlords. That is the main reason. We need to bring in more investments into the sector. We as a state government, we cannot build all the houses that people will live in Lagos. And the only way we can do this is to encourage that sector as well.
Great stuff. One more question for you, just a minute to go. Do you ever see a stage where we can be like South Africa, other countries with a credit scheme that allows us to have monthly rental payments and landlords to accept it? Briefly, if you can.
Oh, we're definitely going to get there. This is a short to medium term framework that we have put into place. Before now, we had 2-3 years rental in Lagos until Governor Fashola came in with the tenancy law in 2012. Now that Governor Sanwo-Olu is also doing this, making sure that people pay their rents monthly, we would graduate to that monthly thing without anybody having to. It's just to put in the framework, set the ball rolling, and let the structure build itself. So we are looking forward to having that all over Lagos without government intervention or without government having to do the backup for the private sector.
All right, great initiative. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us to speak with us. We've been speaking, of course, with Mrs. Toke Benson-Awoyinka, who, of course, is the special advisor to the Lagos State government on housing.